All right, true seekers, sojourners who seek to create a better world. I'll go ahead and give you this State of the Union update. The United States has just completed its midterm elections this past Tuesday on the day of the lunar eclipse. On Wednesday, the day after the election, Tim Pool says this in his show.
But even right now, with the current numbers in Congress, it's looking like the GOP will have the majority. The New York Times is projecting with these close races, it will actually shift even further. And there even is, despite the fact that in the map it's showing like Lauren Boebert may be losing. There's some projections that there may be late ballots being counted that are going to shift heavily Republican. That's normal. That's what happens. Early and mail-in voting favors Democrats. Then as the in-person votes come in, it starts skewing more and more Republican.
And we're not really seeing that. So Tim had a lot of optimism at that time about a strong shift towards the Republicans with these elections. Although with the most recent results the last 2 days, that has not transpired. And just be reminded of the failing Dem issues that you think would have possibly determined the trajectory of the midterms in a fair world. You have Hunter Biden himself, big tech bias, the climate scam and clear hypocrisy, spiking crime in Dem-controlled cities, the Hunter Biden Ukraine-China issue, illegal immigration, inflation, Afghanistan withdrawal, draining strategic oil reserves, Supreme Court pick, won't even define the word woman, Keystone Pipeline issue, accountability on funds to Ukraine, opioids and amphetamines surging across the border, grooming children with alt lifestyle curricula, questions about November 2020 were never resolved, January 6 protesters still imprisoned, lockdowns and V mandates, Joe Biden's proclivities, which are really nasty, and this is not really even an exhaustive list. Carol Becker provides us this thread. Midterm elections for GOP. 1966, minus 1.5 million votes, plus 47 seats. 1978, minus 6 million votes, plus 14 seats. 1994, plus 5 million votes, plus 54 seats. 2010, plus 6 million votes, plus 63 seats. 2022, plus 4 million votes, plus 9 seats. 2022 is on track to be the lowest GOP seat pickup under any first-term Dem president since JFK. How odd. The reason it's odd is because Biden is one of the most unpopular presidents in recent American history. Republicans own 4 out of 5 of the most important issues according to exit polling: inflation, economy, crimes, gun policy, border security. Dems owned abortion. Abortion turned out young people at an unusually high pace, but it's clear that blue states have mass mail-in ballots, weeks of early voting, as well as lax, non-existent laws on ballot harvesting, give a huge advantage to Democrats. And in my view, I think he's absolutely correct that these lax policies are partly shifting the results more in favor of the Democrats. Once again, we're having a strange shenanigans. Per Cernovich, quoting David Weigel, tonight's ballots in Washoe County pushed Democrat Sisker Aguilar into the lead over GOP Secretary of State candidate Jim Marchant, which will hold. If Finchem loses Arizona, down by 109K votes right now, every American First Secretary of State candidate will have lost. And then there's a message, quote tweet from Washoe County. We know that our election live stream cameras went dark overnight. We investigated what happened and how to prevent it happening again. Yeah, I'm sure. In line with the opinion expressed earlier, 50 minutes ago, Tim Pool comes around. Mass mail-in voting means likely voter polls are all wrong and useless. The urban advantage will swing Democrat from here on out, and disinterested voters will vote via ballot harvest. And this is a response to Frank Lunt's completely now bogus prediction. When the dust settles in 2022 midterms, GOP will have between 233 and 240 House seats, outdoing their total from 1994. That would be the expectation based on history. But this is how things look now. Republicans will barely get to their 218 threshold. As you see, they're now only 6 ahead of the Democrats. And over this past weekend, many of the counted totals in different states are leaning heavily Democrat. But at Nevada Senate, Laxalt is just barely ahead of his competitor Matzo by 1,000 votes. And it's expected that this lead could vanish over the weekend. If elections are hosted more fairly, without strange ballot discrepancies, as per 2 years ago in Nevada, maybe Laxalt will get it. Dr. Oz was not the best Senate candidate for Pennsylvania. He partied with spirit-cooking high priestess Marina Abramovich, showing you a bit of his discernment or perhaps his true proclivities. So maybe he was not our best. He even tried to bully Wendy Williams into taking the poke, but she held her ground. Despite the worries we may have about Dr. Oz, We were justified to have real concerns for the person who successfully won the Senate seat in Pennsylvania, Fetterman.
About being very open about the fact we're in use captioning. And I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served.
So that's a no, of course, but to the moderator's credit, he pressed him on it.
I didn't hear you say you would release your full medical records. Why not? You have 30 seconds.
No, again, my Dr. L believes that I'm fit to be serving, and that's what I believe is where I'm standing.
Okay, Mr. Fetterman, thank you.
Yeah, that's where he is standing. The individual had a stroke.
I'm doing fantastic, and it's not about kicking balls in the authority or anything. The difference between them is one of them wears a $5,000 suit, but they're just as dangerous, and we need to make sure what is on the line in this race. Tell me who wins Erie? 25 out of those 54 red counties, more votes.
Again, this guy won. Strokes that affect a person's ability to communicate are often those that affect the surface of the brain. When the brain is damaged by a stroke, it doesn't just heal up in 6 months or so. This brain is gone. It's dead. So Fetterman literally has portions of the brain that are dead. This is, of course, not an image of his brain, but just in general. After a stroke, it looks somewhat like this on one of the imaging studies. And this doesn't just turn normal again. People decided that despite having such a significant issue, they were okay gambling their future on the shoulders of this man. LeMay notes, Democrats are low information voters. They just voted for a dead man and he won by a landslide. Many do not pay attention or just voted for whoever the D on the ballot is. And so this is with regards to the election of State Representative Tony DeLuca, who passed away apparently of some type of blood cancer within the past month. Now think about some of the scandals I had covered in previous videos this year, such as Joe Biden selling off U.S. strategic oil reserves. We have a president who, under these optics, proclaimed that about half the country were akin to domestic extremists. Brian Tyler Cohen notes, Republicans are now blaming their election failure on Lindsey Graham and Rick Scott for saying out loud the Republicans plan to ban abortion nationally and cut Social Security before the election. And so you wonder that Rick Scott and Lindsey Graham are mentioned in the same sentence. Are they not turncoats who specifically created extremist proclamations shortly before the election to try to galvanize the young millennials and Z generation to vote? Remember this statement by Lindsey towards Biden?
It's a person that's probably, you got a problem. You need to do some self-evaluation, because what's not to like? He is as good a man as God ever created. He said some of the most incredibly heartfelt things that anybody could ever say to me. He's the nicest person I think I've ever met in politics.
There you go. That's a very sincere remark about Joe Biden. And then keep in mind that I mentioned both Rick Scott and Lindsey are mentioned in the same sentence as far as kicking the football on abortion. Now, Trump says that he thinks Rick Scott would be much better than McConnell for a Senate Majority Leader. Now, how do you reconcile that?
Will you endorse Rick Scott to replace him in the coming days? Because
well, I think Rick is very good. I think he's highly underrated. Smart guy, works hard, tirelessly. He was a great governor of Florida. He did a great job, and he's a very...
Do you see what I see, guys? I try to veer away from certainty, from conclusion without very ample evidence, but I'm beginning to worry that Trump could be deliberately supporting rhino individuals to ultimately provide wins for the other side. This is that maestro versus joker dynamic that people wonder about, with the former president. It's just something to keep in mind, not a certainty at this point. In a Truth Social message, Trump claims that Rick Scott was responsible for saving Ron DeSantis' election by stopping vote irregularities that occurred during the 2018 election. We know the vote delays occurring all across the country, but especially highlighted in Arizona, are absolutely ridiculous. Pointless disorganization the state of Florida showed is not necessary.
And then the rest of the 75,000 are late earlies dropped off on election day. We do not know where these are from. These could be from anywhere in the county, all 75,000. This is not picked out of a certain area. These are not pulled by precinct.
And so then
Note how sickly sweet and almost condescending his voice sounds.
And when do you think we'll get the results from those remaining uncounted ballots?
we will continue in the rhythm that we've now established over the past few days. I would anticipate, again, one ballot drop or one vote update per day in the evening, probably somewhere in this range that we've been somewhere around 60 to 80,000 a day, which would then make us reach completion very early next week.
Very early next. The chairman of the Maricopa County Board.
Very early next week. And Murray points out that it seems like Maricopa County election officials are admitting they don't have a legitimate chain of custody for 75,000 ballots. Tom Fitton asked if there should be a do-over. The important takeaway for the election of Fetterman is that despite showing ample evidence of not being quite fit for the job, even if there were underhanded schemes occurring with the counting of the ballots, he still garnered a significant number of legitimate votes, meaning people simply do not care. The most rudimentary logical reasoning has completely jumped shark for the sake of the blue versus red color schemes. With the numerous examples of complete cultural degradation I had demonstrated in video content over the last couple of years, I'm just stunned that political compass hardly ever moves. Those on the sidelines who lacked a perspective of the significance of their own civic actions of public service, that is, suffrage, voting, they fail to see how malevolent forces who know how the game works are harnessing their ignorance and apathy to specific political ends. We're all looking for the storm, a sudden change, reversal of fortunes related to mass public awakening or apocalypse. Though, dear truth seeker, with the data that I've seen, relying on my own inherent ability to create trends and considered probabilities for what to expect in the future, excluding the possibility of a massive hidden military intelligence opposition, I would say that political trajectories would predict a shift away from the near socialism we're now headed to a more reasonable, libertarian, slanted capitalist bias over the course of about 8 years. Very slow, likely positive change over 8 years. And this trajectory is largely due to the creation of parallel structures as a consequence of censorship by big tech. Now, in Elon's profile pic, he still wears his costume, the devil's champion, but he got rid of the location and show. If he's just a brilliant autistic man with a patriotic spirit taking over Twitter, he is the linchpin that creates the positive 6 to 8 year gradual awakening trajectory that I see. If there are deeper powers that he's connected to that are working in coordination, that course, I think, may come sooner than such a long time frame. But if he is truly operating independently, it is possible that we may continue to head in the direction of a technocratic socialist state, because the World Economic Forum, Trilateral Commission, IHS, OTO, mainstream media, axis of power has so much entrenched deep influence that in the game theory, with the patriots producing their parallel structures while the establishment further entrenches their existing structures, the focus of control is going to remain on the establishment side, primarily due to overall protection through the court system. But if Musk and Trump are indeed a part of a white hat brotherhood of noble, well-connected individuals, taking actions primarily to achieve stability in the world and saving human life, it actually becomes quite a bit more difficult to predict by what point things will turn for the better. Things could be turning for the better already under that logic, assuming the Republicans are able to maintain control of the House and they don't elect Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. What happens in the United States, I believe, does largely dictate the direction the entire world will go, because the largest collection of loud anti-Sauron, anti-socialism forces still reside within this country. And this is just speaking of the Western English-speaking nations. So we're looking at Canada, United Kingdom, and some of the countries of Europe, as well as Australia. The Eastern countries are pretty much on their own system, and due to their proximity, they have their own political hustle for the supreme ideological models, modes of thinking. But regardless whether connected to a anti-Illuminati brotherhood or not, Elon Musk is in a position of extraordinary capacity to influence the Overton window through use of the leadership role of the United States for the Overton window. It is defined as a political possibility as the range of ideas the public is willing to consider and accept at a given time. Conceptually.org is a good place to read about this concept. Essentially, the world we have relies largely on our expectations of what is acceptable versus unacceptable. The United States has very high standards for what is acceptable compared to some other locations around the world. However, the political left seeks to make that which is unacceptable acceptable pushing the Overton window in a direction that allows the corruption of the youth, ultimately for purposes of population reduction, most believe. Crypto Annan states, what if the world's population isn't actually near 8 billion and they just have been manipulating the numbers for so long as a way to control? We are so told that the world population is 7.9 billion. Note how close it is to 8 billion. I wonder if the recent scourge upon our Earth with the reduction of the numbers was possibly orchestrated in order to prevent the population from getting to 8 billion. You know, a big number of stress for certain people in the controlling category who worry about the population becoming too large. For we would have had 8 billion likely over a year ago had we not had the scourge. The excess deaths continue. I mean, it's really crazy. Some fear it will only get worse. Kari Lake still feels that she has it in the bag and she's going to become the governor of Arizona. I would say that her becoming governor is essential to cleaning up the electoral process in that state and possibly restoring confidence in the electoral system before 2024. If she loses, then that, I think, puts us on that 8-year trajectory towards goodness or nothing. Based on what we've seen with some of the other electoral results over the weekend, the situation is not great. Even earlier in this video, I showed you that Laxalt was ahead by 1,000, and now Matzo won. How is that possible? Look at the percentages of votes that were in when I showed you that he was ahead by 1,000. In the next video, I'll have to address the potential influence on our electoral system through the company FTX, which just went bankrupt last couple of days. I think you guys get the picture, but there are other interesting possibilities. Ciao.